Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be tackling human trafficking. But uh, not just with any old report. We've got the 2024 U.S. Advisory Council on Human Trafficking report. And get this, it's written by survivor leaders who advise the government.
Wow.
Talk about getting it straight from the source.
Yeah.
This report hones in on two key areas, Alaska and the Texas-Mexico border.
I think that it's really powerful when you center the voices of people who have actually experienced trafficking. You get a unique perspective on the challenges, but also the potential solution.
Exactly. So, first up, imagine you're in Alaska with the council.
Hmm.
They went there to understand the unique issues faced by tribal communities.
Right.
It's more than just the headlines, right?
Yeah.
They dove deep into how culture can actually be a protective factor.
What I find so fascinating is how they really immerse themselves in the community. The report mentions them walking icy roads, sharing traditional meals, even dancing with locals.
Wow.
It's about understanding the context, the human side of these statistics.
Yeah, it's not just a flyby visit. It's about building trust, really listening. They met with everyone from federal agencies to community groups. They even attended a survivor-led data summit.
Which is interesting because that ties into a crucial point. The lack of reliable data, especially in Alaska. Imagine, right, you're a survivor in a remote village, and the 9/11 system can't even pinpoint your location.
Oh, wow.
It's a chilling example of how systemic issues can compound the vulnerability of these communities.
And it makes collecting accurate data even harder, right?
Exactly.
The report highlights this vicious cycle. Underreporting leads to fewer resources and less understanding of the problem.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces.
Yeah.
The council is pushing for more resources for missing and murdered Indigenous persons coordinators, better communication infrastructure. Sometimes, the most basic needs, like reliable phone service, can be life-saving.
Absolutely. And speaking of essential needs, the report highlights how Alaska Native communities are often left out of the conversation. One survivor even said that agencies claim they want to work with survivors, but they don't know how, or don't know any survivors. And the survivor's response was powerful. In my experience, we know each other.
That really struck me, too. It speaks to the importance of, tapping into existing support networks. It's not about parachuting in with outside solutions. It's about recognizing and amplifying the work that's already happening within these communities.
Yeah. And the report also suggests that agencies should hire survivor engagement coordinators. It's like they were saying, don't just talk about us, talk to us.
Yeah, it's about bridging that gap between policy and lived experience. These coordinators could help ensure that programs and services are truly meeting the needs of survivors.
And it's not just about listening. It's about providing the right tools and support. The report calls for culturally sensitive training, especially in high-risk industries like fishing and mining, where forced labor is a serious concern. And they go even further, suggesting that fishing and canning companies hire independent advocates for survivors to report to.
Imagine you're facing exploitation in a remote work environment with limited options for help. Having a dedicated advocate could be a lifeline, a way to safely report abuse and access support.
Okay, so that's a snapshot of Alaska, where the council uncovered layers of complexity and systemic challenges. But hold on tight, because we're about to shift gears to the Texas-Mexico border, where the report dives into the intersection of human trafficking and migration. Welcome back to our deep dive into the 2024 Human Trafficking Report. We're shifting gears now to the Texas-Mexico border. And, the report, it really paints a picture of how perilous those migration journeys can be.
Yeah, it's a harsh reality. A lot of these migrants, especially those traveling alone, they're fleeing dangerous situations back home, but, then they encounter new vulnerabilities along the way.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
The council met with a variety of agencies and organizations on both sides of the border, from the Department of Homeland Security to shelters in Ciudad Juarez. They were trying to get a grasp on how trafficking intersects with migration, particularly for unaccompanied children.
Yeah, and the report actually describes their time there as, quote, tearful for some and impactful for all. It's clear that witnessing these vulnerabilities firsthand, really left a deep impression on the council members.
Yeah, and the report really digs into the fact that unaccompanied children are incredibly susceptible to exploitation.
Yeah.
They're often fleeing violence or poverty, making them, prime targets for traffickers who prey on their desperation.
Right, and the sheer number of unaccompanied minors arriving at the border is staggering. It's really a humanitarian crisis that demands a compassionate and effective response.
Absolutely. And one of the council's key recommendations is to increase the number of child welfare professionals within DHS. These professionals would be trained to conduct trauma-informed screenings and ensure that these children receive appropriate care. Think about it. These kids have been through so much. We need to treat them with the utmost sensitivity and understanding.
Right. It's about recognizing that these are children, not just numbers in a system. They need specialized support that considers their unique vulnerabilities and helps them navigate this incredibly complex and often frightening process.
Right. And the report also uncovered another layer of vulnerability: misinformation. Turns out there's a ton of misleading information circulating online about U.S. immigration policies.
Yeah.
This can lead migrants to make, dangerous decisions, putting them right in the path of traffickers.
It's a vicious cycle. Traffickers exploit the desperation and confusion created by these false narratives. The Council recommends that the Department of Homeland Security and the State Department launch more robust campaigns to counter these myths.
It's like they're saying, we need to fight fire with fire, or in this case, fight misinformation with accurate information.
Exactly. And it's crucial to address this problem at its source. But it's not just about debunking myths, it's also about holding accountable those who spread this harmful information.
Right. And speaking of technology and access to information, the report also delves into the CBP-1 app, which is now the main way migrants schedule appointments at the border. While it was intended to streamline the process, it seems to have created some unintended consequences.
Yeah, the reliance on this app can actually create barriers for migrants who don't have smartphones, reliable internet access, or even the language skills to navigate it. It's almost like we're creating a digital divide within the migration process.
Yeah. And there are even concerns about the app's facial recognition software and the potential for bias. It's a reminder that technology, while often helpful, can also exacerbate existing inequalities.
Right.
And the report doesn't shy away from these tough questions. It urges the Department of Homeland Security to explore alternative methods for scheduling appointments, especially for those who might be excluded by the current system.
Definitely. It's a call to make sure technology serves everyone, not just those with access and privilege.
Exactly. And the report also highlights the need for a more proactive approach to preventing trafficking. They talk about something called primary prevention.
Yeah.
Can you explain what that is?
So primary prevention is all about addressing the root causes of trafficking, the factors that make people vulnerable in the first place.
So rather than just reacting to trafficking after it happens, we need to focus on creating conditions where exploitation is less likely to occur.
Exactly. It's about tackling issues like poverty, discrimination, lack of access to education and resources. All of these things contribute to vulnerability.
Right.
And the report recommends increasing funding for community-led organizations that are working to address these issues. It's about empowering communities to build resilience from within.
Yeah. They even suggest a pretty bold move,
Mm-hmm.
encouraging all agencies involved in anti-trafficking efforts to review their own policies and practices to make sure they aren't inadvertently contributing to the problem. That's real accountability.
It is. It's about recognizing that systemic change requires a holistic approach. We need to examine every level, from individual behavior to institutional practices, to truly create a world where exploitation is less likely to take root.
Absolutely. Now, there's another really important issue that emerged from both the Alaska and Texas trips:
Yeah.
substance use and mental health coercion. This is a side of trafficking that we don't often hear about.
It's a heartbreaking reality. A lot of times traffickers, they prey on individuals who are struggling with addiction or mental health challenges. They might introduce drugs to create dependence, or they might use someone's existing struggles to control and manipulate them.
The report includes this gut-wrenching quote, and it says, quote, "We need services to be as easy to access as alcohol, heroin, and fentanyl."
Wow.
It's a stark reminder of how hard it is for some survivors to get the support they need.
It's like we've made it easier to access those harmful substances than to access help, and that needs to change.
Yeah.
The report calls for the development of comprehensive strategies to address substance use and mental health coercion. And they also urge agencies to expand specialized support services for survivors who have experienced this type of exploitation.
It's about understanding that complex trauma that comes with this type of coercion and providing tailored care that meets those specific needs.
Right.
But before we get into that, let's take a quick break to process all of this information. When we come back, we'll wrap up our deep dive with some final thoughts and key takeaways from the report.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into the 2024 Human Trafficking Report. We've covered a lot of ground, from the unique challenges in Alaska to the complexities of the Texas-Mexico border. So now let's zoom out and look at some of the bigger picture recommendations. Yeah, one thing that the report really emphasizes is the need for a shift in thinking. Instead of just reacting to trafficking after it happens, we need to focus on preventing it in the first place. And they talk about this thing called the social ecological model, which basically looks at all the different factors that can contribute to vulnerability.
So it's like recognizing that trafficking doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Exactly.
There's this whole ecosystem of influences from individual circumstances to societal norms that can either increase or decrease the risk of exploitation.
Right. One of the key takeaways is that we need to invest more in something called primary prevention.
Yep.
And this means addressing those root causes of trafficking.
Mhm.
Things like poverty, discrimination, lack of education, limited access to resources.
Right.
If we can create communities where everyone has the opportunity to thrive, we can significantly reduce the likelihood of trafficking even taking root.
And the report calls for increased funding for community-led organizations that are already doing this work on the ground.
Yeah.
These groups, they often have the trust and understanding within their communities to make a real difference.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that solutions need to come from within, not just be imposed from the outside.
Right. And the report even goes further, suggesting that all agencies that are involved in anti-trafficking efforts should take a hard look in the mirror
Yeah.
at their own policies and practices.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just about pointing fingers at others, it's about holding ourselves accountable.
Exactly. It's about asking, are we unintentionally contributing to the problem? And then taking steps to address any areas where we might be inadvertently increasing risk factors.
Absolutely. Another major theme that runs throughout this report is the importance of survivor leadership.
Mm-hmm.
The council is very clear that survivors need to be at the forefront of these efforts.
Yeah. Lived experience is just invaluable.
Yeah.
Survivors bring a unique perspective that can inform everything from, prevention strategies to the development of support services.
And the report recommends that survivors be meaningfully engaged in all aspects of anti-trafficking work, from training development to policy advising.
Yeah, it's about recognizing survivors as experts in their own right. They have so much knowledge and skills to offer, and we really need to tap into that.
And the report even defines what they mean by meaningful engagement.
Right.
It's not just about tokenism. It's about truly valuing and incorporating the voices and expertise of survivors.
Absolutely. And, the report also highlights the importance of diversity and inclusion within anti-trafficking efforts.
Mm-hmm.
They call for engaging with a wide range of partners. This includes community-based organizations, grassroots groups, even those who work directly with people in the commercial sex industry.
So it's about recognizing that no one has a monopoly on the solutions,
Exactly.
and that collaboration is key to developing effective strategies.
Right. And they also stress the need to be culturally sensitive and responsive. What works in one community might not work in another, so we need to be flexible and adaptable in our approach.
Absolutely. Now, there's one more issue that I want to make sure we touch on before we wrap up, and that's the problem of forced criminality.
Yeah, this is a really important but often overlooked aspect of trafficking. It's essentially when someone is forced or coerced into committing crimes as part of their trafficking experience. This could involve things like, drug trafficking, theft, even smuggling other people.
Right. The report points out that a lot of officials don't even recognize forced criminality as a form of trafficking.
Yeah.
And this can have really serious consequences for victims.
Right. Imagine you're a migrant who's been, forced to transport drugs across the border.
Right.
If the authorities don't understand that you are a victim of trafficking, you're more likely to be treated as a criminal than someone in need of help.
The report recommends more research into the risk factors for forced criminality, as well as a review of border practices that might inadvertently increase the risk of this type of exploitation. It's about ensuring that we're not punishing victims for crimes they are forced to commit.
Exactly. So as we come to the end of our deep dive, I think I'm left with a sense of both the immense challenges that we face, but also the incredible dedication of all of those people who are working to combat human trafficking.
Yeah, me too. And this report is a call to action. It's a reminder that we can't afford to be complacent. We need to keep learning, keep advocating, and keep pushing for systemic change.
The report ends with this powerful image, artwork depicting hands reaching out, offering support and connection.
Wow.
It's a reminder that even in the darkest of circumstances, there's always hope, and there are always people working to create a better world.
Yeah, and it's a reminder that each of us has a role to play. We might not all be on the front lines, but we can all contribute in our own way, whether it's through raising awareness, supporting organizations that are doing this work, or advocating for policy changes.
Right.
So as you reflect on what you've heard today, Think about what resonates with you. What's one thing you can do to make a difference in your own community? Even small actions can have a ripple effect, contributing to a world where everyone is safe and free from exploitation.
It's about recognizing that we're all part of this interconnected web and that our actions, no matter how small, can have an impact.
Hmm.
The fight against human trafficking is long and complex,
Yeah.
but it's a fight worth having. And it's a fight we can win if we work together.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah.
We hope this conversation has sparked your curiosity, expanded your understanding, and inspired you to take action.
Thanks for listening.
Together, we can make a difference.